who is ready for some Ned fishing. My favorite fishing buddy.
One of the most famous or infamous new rigs that have swept the bass fishing scene in the last decade. Not talking about the Whopper Plopper, not talking about the umbrella rig. I'm talking about the Ned Rig. The Ned Rig is, as you'll see in the rigging section of this video, a modified jig head with a modified soft plastic. This is what we consider a finesse setup. Small movements designed to key in on the predatory senses and opportunistic feeding habits of bass. Certainly it works for other species as well. I'm a big largemouth bass angler. That's my main focus out here, but it can work for other ones, especially river smallmouth. When it comes to the ideal conditions to use a Ned Rig in, you have nearly unlimited options. Like any soft plastic, they can be adjusted in speed of retrieve and overall amount of finesse or action that you're going to impair into the lure. But most anglers are going to focus on using these types of finesse rigs when these fish have become highly pressured or sluggish. 99% of anglers out there will throw a Ned Rig middle of summer when fish are getting pummeled all day by jet skis, pleasure boaters, people throwing jigs and wacky rigs and crankbaits and spinner baits. And these itty bitty little soft plastics do the trick. However, there's another time of year that this Ned Rig works phenomenally well, and that's the winter. Obviously, it's not the winter right now, but when the water temperature gets cold and those bass don't want to move, they're going to be looking for a high-calorie meal with very little energy expended. And dropping something like a Ned Rig that's just going to wiggle in front of them, it's not going to run away and they're not going to have to chase it, is ideal for those fish. And with that light setup, you're not going to have to worry about spending a lot of energy yourself whipping these big baits and retrieving them really fast over and over and over again. Now, for the water conditions that you want to use these in, because we've already covered that we can use them in warm water, cold water, doesn't really matter. But because this Ned Rig is going to sit on the bottom, you want to fish areas that have sandy or rocky bottoms. Weed beds and things like that are going to hide this lure and it'll increase your likelihood of snags in the process. So even though this is a weedless setup, fishing it too close to heavy cover is going to result in lost lures and a lot of annoyances on your end. But it's one great way to learn how to retie quick. All right, so now we have a nice open area, and I'm going to zoom in on the bottom here where you can see it's sand and rock. Makes an ideal location for the Ned Rig as well as a lot of prey species, whether that be leeches living under rocks or crayfish, especially when they're hiding to molt. This area is ideal for those bottom baits, especially ones that are not going to get hung up too frequently. One aspect of this area that is not highly visible over here is that there is a slow current. So dead sticking in these areas will be deadly effective because you don't have to move the bait. The slow flow of the water is gonna do enough to those baits.
In layman's terms, the Ned Rig was basically a modified jig head and a soft plastic. As you can see, it's a little bit more purpose-built than that. The first difference is in the jig head itself. Ned Rig jig heads are flat or mushroom shaped, which will allow them to sit vertically on the bottom. The eye is also offset towards the side of the jig head, allowing your line to sit up and away from the bottom, reducing snags, increasing your hookups, and allowing this to lay basically motionless on the bottom. These also have a soft plastic keeper, and this particular model has a wire weed guard. The most common Ned Rig soft plastic is a stick bait, like this little TRD style. Basically, it resembles like a half a Senko. These particular models have an extra ultralight air pocket up at the top. What this does is when this bait is dropped to the bottom and dead sticked or left to lie motionless, it's going to move with extra sensitivity, triggering an instinctive bite from the bass who are looking for something crippled or near death. An easy meal, basically. There are a couple of other soft plastic options that you can use to match the hatch. We also have small shad designs. These work really great if you are targeting schooling bait fish. Large bass especially will hang out near the bottom of actively feeding schools to pick off wounded or dying bait fish. Simply sit on the bottom and kind of hoover up whatever comes by. You can see this style right here, as opposed to your traditional soft plastic paddle tail, has additional little rudders in the tail for more movement in very, very subtle current. Last and certainly not least, creature bait like a crawfish or crayfish, depending on where you're from in the country. This has a thicker body to hold the shank of that Ned rig, and then very, very light features that again are gonna move during that drop down to the bottom, and then when they're sitting on the bottom, the current will move them ever so slightly. Have you ever seen a deer or a rabbit freeze when you're walking by them in the woods? That's what most of these bait creatures will do, and the bass know that that very, very slight movement means that there is food there. Ned rigs are a finesse rig. They are designed for subtle movement and big fish. That's why I recommend tying straight to a braided main line. This is going to increase your sensitivity because that braid is very, very perceptive to any movement. Not only will you be able to feel a sluggish bite of a winter fish, but you will also be able to impart, and you'll see here in a minute when I'm finished tying this on, just the slightest bit of movement with very, very minimal rod movement. So we're gonna hook this little bait fish imitation. There we go. See how it looks like a dead fish that's sitting near the bottom? So I'm just gonna lay this down here and just give it the tiniest little movement, and it's going to cause that entire bait to wiggle. And if you were able to make it pop off the bottom with very, very little lift in your line or rod tip, that means you can keep the bait in the same spot right in front of that bass or that undercut or wherever you're targeting and keep it enticing. Stands vertically, and with just a little bit of wiggling in the rod tip, it starts to dance. Now if we move it out a little bit further so I can show you how dragging it across the bottom would look, or doing a little pop in the retrieve. So what we have right here for my finesse Ned rig setup is a Shimano FX 2500. You could use any 2000 to 2500 series lightweight freshwater reel. This has been spooled with a 15-pound spider wire braid. It's going to give you plenty of sensitivity to impart minute little actions as well as feel any sluggish bites. And that is being paired with my St. Croix 7-foot medium fast Triumph. Gives you plenty of casting distance with a light bait and plenty of rod sensitivity with a little bit of backbone so you don't have mushy hook sets. And that again, we are pairing here with a 1/8 ounce Ned head and a silver shiner style bait. All right, let's cast it out and see how it retrieves. So I am going to cast my Ned up and as best I can under a fallen tree. This is usually a job for a jig, but with the bottom being mainly rock and sand, I feel pretty comfortable
that I'm not gonna get too many snags. And I did give it a little extra line there so that it fell straight down, as opposed to if you close the bail, there is going to be an arc as your Ned falls. There's that little bit of shade there, and if I was a lazy fish, that's where I would go. And remember, when you cast on that slack line fall, make sure you're monitoring what your line looks like. It is not uncommon, as this bait is falling, to get a strike. Now, I'm using this Ned Rig right now as a search bait, and I'm using it to kind of explore what the bottom looks like here. If you're familiar with the bottom topography, either you have a depth finder on your boat or it's clear enough to really be able to see the bottom, you can skip this and just target those humps, ledges, and various places where you're going to find the fish. I'm also throwing it out there so that you can see one of the styles of retrieves that you can use with a Ned Rig. Most popular is going to be just a dead stick, leaving it out there and letting that soft plastic just ever so slightly vibrate. You will have to pay attention because, especially if you put it in front of a fish or their fish are very sluggish, they're not going to strike aggressively and run. They're going to take it. You're going to see a change in the line. And that's why it's key to use something sensitive like braid. If you want to impart a little bit more action, keep it in the same place. You can always just very, very gently pop that rod pin. When you do want to retrieve it from its extended position, you have two options. One is you can simply drag it very, very slowly across the bottom. This is going to make some sound, some vibration, pick up some mud. This looks like a crayfish kicking across the bottom, an eel or a fish trying to burrow its way down into the substrate, or even just the last death throes of an animal as well. If the slow retrieve, and hopefully you can see it on my GoPros here, the bounce that you see of it scalloping its way across the bottom. The one curse with finesse fishing is it is slow, it is quiet, relatively relaxing. If you want to add a little bit more flash and dazzle, you can always give them a couple hops across the bottom. That's going to do similar things. It's going to create that noise, it's going to create that vibration and disturbance. It's also going to pop it up a little higher into the water column. If you're on a boat or a pier, you can also vertically jig this, much in the same way of just popping it up and letting it fall straight back down, up and down, up and down. This works really well if you have a rock ledge that you're fishing or stump fields, anything that are going to hold fish in specific places. That vertical up and down jigging is going to attract that fish, force them to come out of their holes, and hopefully grab your bait.